What's up, everybody out there that is seriously into all things Kyber crystals? In this video, I'm going to showcase what would have been my Vader's Vault forged in Kyber contest build back before Star Wars Celebration 2019. Vader's Vault announced that they were going to have a forged in Kyber contest that was kind of like King of the Hill for all the saber builders out there that could build lightsabers from scratch. The rules were pretty strict. Of course, you were allowed to outsource, the electronics, like the sound card, batteries, things like that, things that, not everyone's expected to make from scratch. But everything else in the build had to be pretty much produced and manufactured and handcrafted by the builder themselves. I think they had a clause in there. It was a certain really low percentage of found parts you could use. And so this saber now holds the longest build time record in all of the sabers I've done to date. So this one's about a 4-monther. Learned a lot on this saber, and this is actually kind of like picking up my annual tradition where I build a saber that shows everything that I've learned in 2019. And so here we are. So after I wrapped my head around what I was going to do on this build and read all of the contest rules, it took me a long time to really figure out the concept I wanted to go with this particular build and piece it all together, the electronics, everything I wanted to use inside. So this is the most challenging thing I've done so far. In the end, I decided to go with the Proffie, because it was the only soundboard out there that would do Neopixel, all the effects, obviously smooth swing, and at the time that was, the only board at the time that could do smooth swing. And so I knew I wanted it to have all those elements, and I also wanted it to be able to run a motorized crystal chamber. And like with the Prism 5.1, which is what I was using before for Neopixel, whenever you go into Neopixel mode, there's not enough pads left over on the card to run a motor, and so you have to do other tricks like latching to switches, which is what I had to do in the previous Glass Flex that has the 5.1 with a motor. So the Proffie for me was the way to go, and it takes a while to learn it. It was a good month learning curve to learn every single thing the board can do, and so I kind of needed that time to figure it out. But what happened was I got well over halfway or 3/4 of the way through making the chassis, and I contacted Vader's Vault and said, hey, I'm ready to go ahead and send you guys my entry fee. Let's do this. And so unfortunately, a couple days went by, they came back and said, we're so sorry, we didn't have enough participation. So I guess apparently there's not enough builders out there that are building sabers from scratch anymore. And so I decided, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and finish this thing myself. Follow it through, because I already had it all ready to go in my head, and so that's what I did. So here we are many months later, and it's taken a lot of tweaking, a lot of programming to get it exactly the way that I wanted it. And so I guess we'll just go ahead and dive in right here. So some of the things that happened along the way was I wanted to make it remote control, like a couple of the previous sabers that I've done with the car alarm remote. And so I had already installed those electronics to make it remote control with, I put blade on B and auxiliary on A on this particular remote. And so, it works with the remote control. You got your aux and deactivation. So that was already in there. But what I discovered is that, I don't know why, but with the Proffie board, this doesn't sync up real great all the time. I have to push the buttons multiple times sometimes to get it to work. It's a little finicky, but it works. And so luckily, Dmitry Shatuk finally came out with his app, the Force Sync app, and it's like the greatest thing ever. So I have that running on the iPad right now. And when I get into the chassis, I'll explain, how to activate this saber. And so here's the Force Sync app on the iPad. I've got it off to the side, and I'm just going to be controlling everything that way for now. So I can just leave it on the stand and show it off. What I did with this chassis is what you're seeing right now is the outside shell of the Kyber crystal shell that I made. Originally, I wanted to do a green glass edge acrylic to sort of make it look like a greenish Kyber crystal. But I wanted to do a clear prototype first before I used up all my green edge glass acrylic because it's a little more money. And so I made a clear prototype, and this is the clear prototype. When I turn the lights on and we pull out the chassis, I'll show you some of the prototype pieces that I had to go through to even get it to this level. So the great thing about having an acrylic hilt is that all radio frequency and RF frequencies can get in and out of the hilt. This hilt has 3 antennas total inside of it. It has an antenna that controls the car remote control. It has an antenna that's for the Bluetooth for Dimitri's Force Sync app. And then it also has a Bluetooth audio transmitter in here, which is a low delay system. And I actually have a low delay Bluetooth speaker I'm going to pull out after I run through, some of the fonts and the functions and show you this in the dark. So yeah, there's 3 antennas in there. So it's real important that signals are able to get in and out of this hilt, because with the way I designed this prototype, there's no buttons at all on the outside. So the only way to control this saber is either with the car remote or with Dimitri's app. And I kind of like it that way. It's almost like all the time you're using, the force to activate, deactivate, and do all, activate everything on this saber. Okay, so let's get into it. Here we go. I've been slowly taking my font libraries, whether it's Plector Lab or NEC, and converting them over to Smooth Swing. So one of my all-time favorite fonts is a Plector Labs font, and it's Desolation. And so let's go ahead and fire it up on Desolation, and then after I turn the lights on, I'll show you guys, the Smooth Swing part of it. But I'm just gonna run for like the first, I think I'm up to like 14 Smooth Swing fonts, because I've been converting them, and then I've got the stock fonts. So let's go ahead and fire it up. And here we go. Here's your clashes. And right now I've got a strobe effect going on the saber. And because of the camera refresh rate, it kind of looks like waves of light going through, but it's actually strobing, like seizure style. Here's your blasters. Lock up. And then if the blade were in, tip drag. And then your force sounds. All right, deactivation. So we'll go to the next font. And one of the things that I discovered halfway through this build is that I can actually switch fonts while the saber's activated, which is pretty cool because you can just roll through the fonts as fast as you want. So I'll do that here, in a minute or so when I show off a couple more of the fonts. So here we go. Another Plector font. Flashes. That's been converted to Smooth Swing. Lock up. And so I'm sure you can see on the inside of the saber, we've got different color things going on. So the blade and the crystal chamber are mirrored together, and this is channel 1 on the Proffie. So you can control multi-channels on the Proffie. This is channel 1, this is channel 2, which is tied in with the motor, and then this is channel 3, which are Neopixel Rings at the end, and I have the light facing both directions, and these are run in series. So go to the next font. Of course, an NEC font, one of my favorites that I switched over to Smooth Swing. This is a gradient blade, so one end of the saber is blue, and the other end is red, and then it's purple, like a smooth gradient in between, as you can see. Flashes, blasters, lock up. All right, now I'm going to show you how you can just slide through the fonts with it activated. So let's go to the next one.
Imperial Knight.
Imperial Knight by Jedi Seth. Well done, man. Great font. I love this font. So here we have a red flash on clash. This is a white blade, but with strobing on the other 2 channels. White strobing blasters. Lock up. And your force sounds. Good stuff. Alright, so while it's activated, I can actually move on up to the next font.
Yes, I am.
Kylo Ren, K-Sith's, I think, greatest achievement. If you go through and you listen to all the individual files on this font, he really layered in some really creepy dark side sounds, and it's just great. I think this is my favorite font that he's done for sure. Clashes. And this is a red Fireblade, of course, on stable. Blasters. Force. Lock up. And then we can go right into the next font. Luke Skywalker. Clash. Blasters. Force. Lock up. And then we can go straight from lock up into Darth Vader's font. K-Sith again, another amazing font. Next.
You made a fair one. Screaming about it.
Yeah, it's not wise to upset a Wookiee.
But sir, nobody worries about upsetting a droid.
Because a droid don't pull people's arms out of their sockets when they lose. Wookiees are known to do that.
I see your point, sir. I suggest a new strategy, Art. Let the
So yeah, this is a font I've been working on for quite a while. It's the Millennium Falcon training font. I pulled the audio out, built it from scratch. It went on the NEC Saber board before, but here we go. Clashes. It's kind of like when Luke's getting hit in the leg. Blasters. Lock up. And then on to the next. The Dark Order. NEC font converted to smooth swing. Sounds great. Next. And so this is another font that I made from scratch. One of my all-time favorite video games, probably second to The Force Unleashed, which is called Subnautica. If you've never played this video game, I highly recommend it. It is unreal. So these are just some sounds from it. Flashes, blasters. The game is basically an underwater theme on an alien planet, and so a lot of these are like creature sounds. Lock up is when your underwater submarine's being attacked. And so what I love is the startup ignition sounds and then the shutdown. We'll do the ignition again. And shut down. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is go backwards.
The Dark Order.
stretch out with your feelings.
Lord Vader.
I feel the good in you. You are a monster. Imperial Knight. Hidden warrior.
Okay, so now we're back to Desolation. The very first font is Dark Khyber. And, but we'll go to Desolation for the Smooth Swing demo, so here we go. Alright, so let's fire it up and let me show you what Smooth Swing looks like and sounds like in the dark on this saber. Here we go. Not too aggressive sounding. I actually took the sounds from Smooth Fuzz and retuned them to match the hum in this. Okay, let's go to the next font. This one's super aggressive sounding. Now, the next thing I learned how to do is accent swings. So, I think one of the best sounding accent swing ones is, these are pretty loud, but you can hear how aggressive that sounds. But then when you give it a good swing, then it does an accent swing from the NEC swings in the library. Nice and slow, and then you give it a good swing. And then if you spin the saber, whoops, knock the stand out of the way. Let's put that back. Alright, next font. Imperial Knight. Maybe you can see the strobing now that I have it closer to the camera. Look at that. Cool. Next.
Yes, I am.
Kylo. Love this font. Super creepy sounding. Next font.
Confidence is your weakness.
Luke Skywalker. Next. So I really tweaked the accent swings on this one, and it uses classic Vader's deep, smooth swing sounds. The blade move cutting through the air slowly, and then when you swing it, I went with the deeper sounds. So when you spin it, you get his deeper sounds in there. All right, next. Now what I did with this was I actually sampled Ben Burtt's hum from the lightsaber sounds, and I converted it to smooth swing. One note up, one note down, and then one note in the center. So there's 3 pairs of smooth swings in this. 4 pairs, sorry. And so you can hear it almost. I tried to go for that sound where he like moves, you know, the microphone in front of the speaker that you see when Ben Burt created these. Let's see if you can hear that. And so then when you swing it fast, it uses the actual fast swing sound and the accent swings. There you go. Alright, next. And so this is one of my favorite ones that I converted from NEC. Very aggressive sounding. And then when you swing it fast, you get the classic NEC swing sound. Alright. Next one. My Subnautica font. Yep, Pommel moved. Look at that. Subnautica font. Now this you can barely hear because it's really deep tone sound. So it's kind of like this eerie, like, constant bass movement of sounds. Alright, so let's power that down. So, let's get this back on the stand. Let's turn some lights on so you guys can see what this thing looks like. That's it for the lights off demo. Okay, so I had to come in and make an edit because I realized 2 things. One, I did not show off my glow-in-the-dark blade plug in the dark. And I didn't do like a close-up 360 of the hilt in the dark with it all illuminated. So the quickest way to sort of get the glow-in-the-dark blade plug going, it's a Neopixel, it's a custom Neopixel glow-in-the-dark blade plug, and I think it has about 8 pixels that are like, you know, formed in like a loop shape. So I'll zoom in real close with the saber and see if you can see the pixels kind of like doing like a U shape, and it's pretty cool because it looks like the fire is coming out and then going back in when I get nice and close. So let's go ahead and try to find the brightest font, which I believe would be Imperial Knight. Let's see where we were.
Team C.
No, let's go back.
The Dark Order.
Remember, a Jedi can feel the Force flow.
Lord Vader.
I feel the good in you. You are a monster. You are a monster. Imperial.
There we are. Imperial Knight. So let's fire it up, and because this is white, now it's a strobe white on the lower half of the hilt, but the blade is a solid white. But that'll cause the blue glow powder that I glued in all around the Neopixels to illuminate quicker. So here we go. So we'll go ahead and give the full 360 up close. Start at the emitter, and then I'll move it over after I show off the glow plug. I'll move it over to a fire blade, and then maybe you can see the pixels going in like a loop. But here's the custom blade plug, all acrylic, filled with crafter's epoxy. I finally decided to go with. I'll go through all the different steps that I found of what would work best for this. If you notice, there's also bubbles in this part of the build because I had to pour this in layers. And so the very first pour that I did with the saber like this, the first pour came up to here and it actually had some bubbles in it. And I actually thought it looks kind of cool because this is the end of the saber that would be really hot. And so, you know, whatever's going on inside of there is creating bubbles, or if it's fluid or whatever. So, yeah, here's the custom blade plug. I'll go ahead and give you guys a full 360 of the saber. Up close. And so there's where the blade retention is. I hit it agreeably. And here's the control box on the top. Some copper accents. And then we get down into the crystal chamber section. There's your rotating crystal chamber. Up close. There we go. And then your acrylic and copper fins. And what's pretty wild about this is like the prismatic effect that it has going through the acrylic. Some things look doubled up when you have it like rotated at a certain angle. And so we get into this is where the motor's hidden, is in this section. And when I pull the chassis out, you guys can see all this stuff, you know, outside of the acrylic. And then this is button number 1. That is the digital switch that turns power on and off to the saber. There's no physical slide switch or no pull kill key. That button right there is for this guy right there is for the power. I'll explain that when I get the chassis out. So, the battery wrapped in real copper foil. Of course, my magnetic system that holds the battery in with magnets. It is a permanently installed battery, but can be easily swapped out, as you've seen from the previous videos. Here's where your Proffie is, under this section. This is a power button to the Bluetooth card. I can turn the Bluetooth card on and off, so I can put it in pairing mode anytime. And this is main and auxiliary buttons. So I decided to make it 2-button build instead of the 1-button. And then this has 2 speakers in it, just like the Glass Flex. It's 2 24mm 8-ohm speakers that are bridged down to 4 ohms, and then I use the full 3 watts at 3000 on the volume for the Proffie, so this thing hurts my ears. Hopefully you can hear me talk when I'm at this end, because it's loud. So I'm going to get closer to the phone. And then, of course, this is the end with the Neopixel Rings with sound holes. And so this took some serious prototyping to make this work, and I'll show it with the lights on. So when we turn the saber off, let's go ahead and rotate the stand. Let's get the end of this right in the camera so that when I turn it off and I'll hold it up close, you can see the glow-in-the-dark blade plug. Here we go. There you go. So it's blue glow-in-the-dark powder in here that's all inside the blade plug, and so it kind of looks like it's cooling off after you shut it down. And then what I did was I took all of the little scraps that I had left over from where my laser cutter would cut out circles on the acrylic disc, and there's these little tiny cylinders that are left over, and I filled those up inside the blade plug mixed with the powder, and it actually made a pretty cool effect. You'll see it better with the lights on, but I want you guys to see it with the lights off, and then let's see what happens when we go to a Fireblade font.
You are a monster.
Now, I don't know if you can see where the seam is, but it kind of looks like the fire is making a loop. And if you do it this way, it looks like the fire is going one direction. And then if you do it the other way, it looks like the fire is going the opposite direction because the Neopixels are in a loop. So there, I just wanted to show that before I turn on the lights and start showcasing the chassis and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and power it down, and I will be back with the gloves on after I clean this thing up and polish it, because you can see fingerprints with the lights on. So be right back. Okay, I am back with part 2 with the lights on for the Kyber Crystal Saber. Another thing that took me a while to figure out was what I was going to call this saber for the project. And so my fiance and I turned this name over and over again and was trying to come up with something that had something to do with Illum, because that's the planet where the Kyber crystals are mined. And so we kind of came up with this story and this theme where It's a Jedi that guards the caves of Illum. And so we were going through all kinds of names of what to call the saber. And I was like, Illuminate, Illuminator. That was a little too Arnold Schwarzenegger and Terminator for me. So she's a big Harry Potter fan, and so I'm a big Star Wars fan. So we combined the two words and came up with ILLUMOS. So that's the name for this saber. And one of the things I wanted to do is jump in and talk about some of the prototyping stages I went through to make this happen. So as you guys know, I'm all about the acrylic cutter, and so here are some of the prototype pieces right here that I went through to finally get to the first working prototype of, the entire hilt. So that's piece number 3. So I started out on the laser cutter, cutting out panels and doing the measurements that would, fit the inside diameter for a 1.25 or MHS inside diameter chassis. So this was like the first prototyping I started doing right here. So you cut these panels out in rectangles. And so of course I did like a short version of it just to see if I could make it work. And then this is a separate piece in there that kind of, keeps it rigid and keeps it from moving around, and it gets, the whole thing gets filled up with epoxy to make this happen. And so there's this ring piece in here that gives it structural rigidity. And then the crafter's epoxy, when you stand the hilt up on its end, I had to do this like in the bathtub, and I had to put like fluid channels here all the way around the outside so that when I drip the epoxy down inside, they go down and they fill up this chamber, but then there's a clear acrylic tube. You can see it in the second prototype right here. This is your 1.25 MHS diameter, and this is a clear acrylic tube inside of these panels, and then this is epoxy in here. This was my first attempt with like 4,000 PSI epoxy on the inside. And it's like you have to pre-mix it and then pour it in there, and it's like molasses. It's so slow, really hard to work with. But I wasn't happy with A, it yellows, and B, it's the separate layers are really visible, and I wanted it to be crystal clear for the first prototype. Who knows? I may try to perfect this later on because this is a stronger solution. This would definitely make it seriously dual worthy. But in the end, I decided to go with the crafter's epoxy. Which still cures, fairly hard, but it's not like this 4,000 PSI stuff. So yeah, you could probably drive over this, with a truck, and I don't even think it would break. So this is super strong. And so then I went through different prototyping on the end caps for the speaker sound had to get out. And so this was the first prototype. Things got a little messy. I decided it didn't look good enough. This is actually the end of a pen, and was going to see if I could drill that out, and I could put a screwdriver in here to do the potentiometer for Bluetooth back to internal speaker, which I'll show when I pull the chassis out there, and explain what that does. So yeah, this was one of the speaker grill prototypes, and it just didn't go so well. So there's that one. And then this was the final. This saber actually has 2 different pommel pieces, one for display, which is this one, but it doesn't let any sound out. But this is all crafter's epoxy inside of there, and I built this up, and I have to mask everything off. And so this was a challenge. It took me a while to figure out how I was going to make this hilt look like an actual Kyber crystal with a fully removable chassis. But I was real happy with this part of it, and when I get it in there, you'll see what this does with the lighting and prismatic effects. You can kind of check it out, see what it does right there. You get a little bit of the idea, but I'll show that later. So let me set those off to the side. So the next thing I want to go over is how to get the chassis out. And then we're going to go through, every step of the chassis like I always do. So let's go ahead and remove the pommel. What I did was cut triangular vents in the bottom of it so that the sound would come out. What happens is the sound comes out of the pommel and hits this and comes out the sides of these in all directions, and it's crazy stupid loud. So I'm really happy with the way the pommel turned out for sound, And then, you know, when I want to remove this and just put it like in display mode, what I did was I created a twist lock system on the acrylic cutter. You twist it, and then you just pull it off like so. And so there is the twist lock system on the bottom of it. And these twist lock patterns lock into these two bolts right here. And so if I want to use the decorative pommel, I'll just take these Allen bolts out, set them off to the side. Another one, just unscrew them. And then I can take the decorative pommel like this, pop it on, like so. And that's like for display mode. But what's funny about it is that when you fire it up, you can hardly hear it because this thing is almost airtight. So let's fire it up. Listen, completely quiet. You can actually hear my ambient space music, crystal ambient space music in the background over top of the sound of the saber. Also, let's move the stand out of the way. So yeah, it's pretty silent. So now watch the difference when I pop this off of here. So this is smooth fuzz, and I really dug into the accent swings on it because I like smooth fuzz. And started adding swing sounds for when you spin the saber fast or whatever, and then I also had some fun with some of the other sounds. So here we go. There's the swings, and every once in a while, you get all the Wilhelm screams. I think there's 4 different ones in there. So yeah, the accent swings are a lot of fun. Thank you, Matthew, for that. That's good stuff. So let's shut her down. And then let's go ahead and take the chassis out. And the way that you do that is I've got the blade retention screw right here. So this pops the Kyber crystal out. And the Kyber crystal blade plug. And so here we go. Loosen that blade retention. Pop out the blade plug. Here's the blade plug, custom one I made with the glow-in-the-dark powder and the Neopixels. This is all filled with crafter's epoxy, so it is like, you know, prismatic effect. Here's all the little scraps left over from my laser cutter. You can see moving around in there. Kind of bounces the light all over the place, and then it's got the Neopixel connector, Plector pixel right there. There's a blade plug. So the only way I can get this out is I made a scrap piece of blade, and you have to slide it in the end of it, and this is a tight friction fit as usual on the inside, and so you have to flip it over and then push the hilt down, and then the chassis comes out. Just like this. There it sticks out the end, and you just grab it and pull it out the rest of the way. There you go. Set the hilt off to the side. Let me set this down. And then I'll show. So here's the hilt, empty. And real quick 360 on that without the chassis on the inside. So there it is, completely empty. You look down, there's your 1.25, all acrylic, and then crafter's epoxy filled up in here. This was not easy. All right, so we'll set that off to the side. And then let's go over every part of the chassis. Let's switch fonts. Let's just shut it down and then fire it back up. Okay, so let's start from the emitter. And if this looks familiar, that's because this used a lot of the same architecture that I used on the glass flex. And so there's your Plector pixel connector at the end. This is before Dimitri came out. Well, before I was able to get a hold of some of Dimitri's like emitter that have the pixels around it style. So that's why I had to make my own blade plug. But this is the Plector pixel connector on the end. And then I colored it to, you know, match the pins and sort of match the build. And so this end piece is very similar to the way that I set up the glass flex. And then you can see all your wiring through the clear acrylic right here, going down through a data and your plus and minus. And then we get into the crystal chamber. Get in here close. And so, yeah, again, this is like a aqua aura on the greener side Kyber crystal, because I wanted to use the green edge lit acrylic for the Kyber crystal hilt itself. And then, you know, Greebly Madness, and then some pins in there to sort of come up close to the crystal. Let's go ahead and fire it up. You can see. Let's go to the next font. Get right in here. So as you can see, the pins get real close to those bars that go around. Copper accents in there, brass, the whole nine. And then copper radiator fins with clear acrylic in between them. And then I did like kind of like a tooth design where the acrylic sticks out a little bit. And of course the crystal chamber mirrors the build. All right, and then moving further down the build, I'll show the back side of the crystal chamber real quick. There's your clear with copper fins, and then these super thin acrylic rods in here hold in this piece of cardstock. This is like my metallic cardstock that I've found over the years, and I've discovered recently that I can put it in the laser etcher and etch patterns into it, so it just doesn't look like, you know, a smooth flat copper. I actually etch like electronic patterns in there and stuff. And so these clear rods that run down all the way through to here hold all of this in, and then underneath this is your crystal chamber DC motor right there. And when I fire it up, you can actually see the gears that ratio it down so it doesn't spin, you know, so fast, because these little motors spin really fast. You got to gear it down to make this kind of go a little slower. So we'll fire it back. Let's go to the next font. So if you look, you can see the gears doing their thing in there. Pretty crazy looking. Shut it down. So yeah, there's your motor. These are quick disconnects for when I need to switch out the battery in a few years. We'll go to the next font.
Warrior.
And so the other thing that's hidden underneath here, and why I went with cardstock, metallic looking cardstock instead of metal, like sheets to cover this up, is because I wanted radio frequency RF signals to go through here. And what's underneath of there is the tiny antenna for the car alarm remote control right here. So then moving further down the build, of course, we got the 18650 high drain wrapped in real copper foil, magnetic system in there, so easily removable whenever you need to in a few years. And then we flip over to the other side and I'll go over the buttons. Now this is the digital button I was talking about. Dimitri posted it, and then KR Saber started carrying these. There's these little electronic PCB cards that have a button on them, and it's like a digital switch. You don't use a physical flip switch or a kill key. This will actually turn on and kill power to the soundboard and the entire Saber, and it's really nice because it's got multiple solder pads on it so that you can hook quite a few things up to it if you start running out of pads on the sound card. So I love these things. I'm going to start using these in future builds. It does have a power illumination light on it in there. Also, as usual, I set up the, let me grab it real quick, the charger cord. It's right here. I set it up as usual on this build so that I can have it on display with the chassis, and then this magnetic USB connector charges the Saber. I can leave it on display like this. I can fire it up with the charger on. Again, it doesn't hurt anything. So I can even use the remote control to fire this up with it on display, and this plugged in, and it will never run out of power. It'll just sit there like, you know, your cell phone, or always have power supplied to it. I'll shut it down. Okay, so there's that magnetic USB connector. The next button down is going to be Bluetooth activation and deactivation. This powers up the Bluetooth card. So if I want to put it in pairing mode, I just hit and hold this button, and eventually you'll see it go into Bluetooth pairing mode. And there it goes. So the greatest thing about having a Bluetooth transmitter, once you get a low delay system, and you have to have a low delay transmitter and a low delay receiver Bluetooth speaker, is I finally, after shopping for many Bluetooth speakers, went out and found this little bad boy. And this is a low delay speaker system for Bluetooth. And this thing's actually pretty loud. So the truly fun thing about this is I can connect this Saber's Bluetooth to anything that has a low, delay Bluetooth receiver. I've got one in my car now. I've got one on the surround sound system. And now for display purposes or for the video demo, which I'm doing here, I've got the Bluetooth speaker that is low delay. So the way that I pair it up is I put the Bluetooth speaker into pairing.
Hello.
And then hold it in pairing mode. Now it's pairing. And there we go.
Connected.
Just that fast. Connected. So when I fire this up, you're going to notice that you're going to hear the speaker inside the chassis. And I'm going to fast forward down to the end here because I need to talk about that. But when I turn on the Saber, you'll hear the sound is really low coming out of the speaker, and it's really loud coming out of the chassis. And so it took me a while, but I figured out finally a way to toggle between the two really easily. And so let's fire up the Saber, and then I can tune this. So watch.
Imperial Knight.
Let's go to the next font.
You are a monster. I feel the good in you. Lord Vader.
Yeah, sure, we'll use Vader's. Why not? It sounds pretty loud. Okay, so there's a little bit of sound coming out of the Bluetooth speaker, and what I did was I found a potentiometer that connects to not only the Bluetooth transmitter, but also the internal speaker. And so I use my screwdriver and get down in here, and I can rotate this and turn off the Saber speaker, and the further I go, then you'll hear the Bluetooth speaker get louder. Okay, and then I back off a little bit so that there's no back off on the signal noise ratio, and then I can turn up the sound on this speaker. Oh, it's going to be a touch sensitive thing. That's hilarious. Okay, let me take the glove off. Gotta have a bare finger to do that. Here we go. Okay, and then there's also different sound effects on this speaker. So I have like effects with reverb on it, a 3D stereo effect. So there's quieter, louder, and then one more. This is my favorite. So this is super crisp, loud on the Bluetooth speaker. And here we go. Low latency. Low delay. And then accent swings. Yeah, this thing's loud. Blasters. Lock up. And shut down. All right, so that takes care of explaining the Bluetooth and the way that works. So your Bluetooth audio transmitter right here, the antenna's right there, so that is able to go through another version, like kind of a brass etched version of the cardstock, because this cardstock looks like brass, and then I put it in the laser cutter and etch all kinds of little circuit looking things in there and stuff. And so then I did the same thing on this panel. We get down into here, and this is where the Proffie is, and on top of the Proffie is the Feezy Bluetooth connection system to use with Dimitri's app underneath here. So there's one antenna here, and another antenna here. and all of it can get out of the hilt completely because it's all cardstock and acrylic. So I'm just, you know, continuously trying to improve upon this design to where you can use Bluetooth efficiently. Let me show you again about the delay part of it. So let's go to another font.
I suggest you try it again, Luke.
The Dark Order.
And I want to show you low delay. There's about a third of a second of delay on a low delay system. This is as good as you can get. Barely noticeable. This is fairly newer technology on the Bluetooth side. So there you go. All right, so moving further down, of course we have main and auxiliary, and these all have miniature neodymium magnets glued to the top of the tactile switches. 1, 2, 3, 4. So when I do the green edge lit glass, I'm gonna use a different type of epoxy in that that's drillable. And so what I'll do is drill down through the epoxy to match up with these holes, and then I'm gonna have magnetic rods in there that will stick to the buttons, and then I have to pull the rods out of the hilt to remove the chassis. But you will be able to access buttons on the next version of this, you know, from the outside of the hilt type of thing. And then this right here is the data connection for the Proffie, and I've found a super slimline 90-degree connector that goes in there just like this. And let me kill the power to it, just because that's a good thing to do. There we go, power is killed, and then I can put the 90-degree connector right here, and it fits just barely in there. Now I can hook it up to my Mac, sync it, upload all, you know, the new programs, new OS, the whole nine. And with the Proffie, you can even connect to the SD card. Now granted, it's a slower, much slower connection, but you can reformat the SD card and copy more fonts, you know, over, or change the fonts, the whole nine right through this connector. So it's really handy without having to pull the SD card every single time. You can pull the SD card in this build with tweezers, you get way in there, but this is just kind of nice. If I'm copying a bunch of fonts over, I just reformat everything, copy it over, walk away, and come back, you know, in like 20, 30 minutes, because I got 80 fonts on here and it's done. So there's that. Get that out of the way. Fire it back up. Whoops. Let's go for the aux. All right, so there's that, and then you can see the three magnets stacked together to hold the battery in. Then we get down into here, and again, this saber has two speakers in it, two 24mm 8 ohms that were bridged down to 4 ohms, and I'm using all 3 watts on the Proffie. So that's one workaround to be able to use all the power that comes out of the Proffie. It's a pretty powerful amplifier. With the Crystal Focus X coming out with a, what is it, a 3.2 or 3.3 watt amplifier, that's another trick you can do. Run 2 speakers and you'll use up all that power, and it'll be crazy loud. So right here's a sound hole. So you get sound shooting this way out of the chassis. You can see it right there. There's one speaker. And so then the wires are all soldered in. These are joined together with leads right there. So the speakers are run in parallel to take 2 8 ohms down to 4 ohms. And then here are the Neopixel rings in the end. Right here, they are 8 segment Neopixel rings right there. And you saw the potentiometer already. And then there's the other speaker, you know, firing this way. And then I just made like a custom grill, thick custom grill out of thick acrylic. And then these, you know, hold everything together. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else we can go over. That should pretty much do it. Let me go ahead and give you guys a 360 with it ignited. Here we go.
Flourish.
Hopefully you guys can hear the bass coming off the Bluetooth speaker. What a wicked sounding font. Flourish is awesome. Well done, Nightcap. Alright, I'm just going to shut up and rotate this around for you guys to check it out. Last pass. To one of the last fonts. I'm gonna go through a bunch of them here. Into my last smooth swing font.
You are Luke Skywalker.
Lord Vader.
Now be careful.
The dark.
Team C.
Smooth gray. Smooth fuzz. Velocity.
So Velocity, another NEC font that I converted just yesterday and threw on here, and it's just, I love the way this sounds. Super aggressive. Hopefully that's not distorting when it's recording, because the microphone, I know, compresses if it gets too loud, so. Alright guys, that pretty much does it for the ILLUMOS demo. As always, thanks for tuning in everybody, and may the Force be with you. Take care.